Okay. Hi, I'm Lee, and I'm a local independent climate activist, but I've worked with many groups over the last year, for the most part, just the Oil and Extinction Rebellion. I'm also now working a bit with Uplift and Friends of the Earth. And I just want to start by talking about how I got involved in climate activism, because I've always been a very, very political person. Politics is my degree. I studied social sciences at college before I went to university. It kind of makes sense for me as a person to be doing activism in this way. But up until a year ago, I never really was that involved in the climate movement, even though I knew very obviously that climate change is a massive issue. It's something that I care about and something that we should all care about. I knew all this, I knew how bad it was, but I wasn't doing anything with that information. And last year, in February of last year, I went along to a Just Stop Oil talk. And in that talk, they talk about the reality of the climate science, and then they talk about the social science behind their tactics. But they also brought up something during that talk that really resonated with me and sat with me. And that was this idea of soft climate denial, right? Like apologies, you have your run-of-the-mill climate denial. We all know people like that, like Donald Trump and all these people who don't believe that climate change is real, or they believe that it is real, but we're not the cause of it, and that it will be fine, don't worry about it, or they believe it's all a big conspiracy. But there's another kind of climate denial that I think a lot of us, very unfortunately and subconsciously, are affected by, and it's this idea that we know that the climate crisis is bad, we know that something needs to be done about it, but because it's such a large and overwhelming issue, we don't behave like it's the emergency that it is. We just continue with our day-to-day lives. And that's not like a moral judgment on anyone. Nobody's at fault here. It's kind of a self-preservation instinct. And when I was faced with that, and I went home and I thought about it, I realized that I was definitely, subject to that was something that I was doing. And I realized I couldn't, continue my life that way. I couldn't continue not fighting, to the extent of my ability, to prevent climate crisis. So I started organizing and volunteering with Just Stop Oil. I started out just leafleting, and then like helping organize and hold talks. And then I was doing police station support. I was helping other activists who were putting their freedom on the line, and making sure they got home safe and things like that. Like nothing really intense or scary, because I was very afraid of getting arrested. Rightly so, it is a very scary experience. And I'm autistic as well, so I knew that my experiences getting arrested probably wouldn't have been ideal. And there are so many people out there for whom dealing with the police is like an increased risk as well. So it just, at that point, it wasn't something that I could have conceived of doing. So I was doing like the support side of stuff, which is so crucial. And I was, helping look after activists back at the safe house and making sure they were all fed and watered. And, learning how to give nonviolent direct action training, which is a really important skill to have to teach people how to take action in ways that are safe. And I was learning all these different skills and building it all up. And then eventually I got wind of a protest going on down in Essex where they were doing more oil terminal occupations. And I just was like, okay, sign me up. I'm going to do it. Really jumping in the deep end. And I remember I traveled all the way down from Aberdeen to like London, like with no phone, just like a big rucksack. And we all piled it into this tiny Airbnb. And then like the next morning, like 5 a.m. we all like filed out of the house and went and climbed over this big fence, and there was a security guard with a dog, and we climbed up into the pipes, and we just waited. And eventually we were brought down and checked into the police station and then released later that day. And for me, that was like a turning point in my mind. And I was like, we are capable of so much more than we could ever think. And because I couldn't have conceived that is something I could ever have done, the thought of doing that is terrifying and scary. And it's just out of the realm of possibility for most people to even consider breaking the law in that way, even though not a single person was harmed by us doing it. The entire duration of when we were there, they could not move oil. the flow of oil in that oil terminal was halted. And when they did something, when Just Stop Oil did something similar in Glasgow, I think it was in May last year, they held that oil terminal for 60 hours. 60 hours where no oil could move through that oil terminal. And that cost that company millions, right? And it was like 30 dumb 20-year-olds just like hopping over fences and like pulling their hands together and locking on to pipes and stuff. And it just really amazed me that was something that we could do. But also, again, as I said, that kind of action isn't accessible to everyone. But things like when we occupied the library at the university, you know, nobody got in trouble that day. We just were on the bottom floor of the library, causing a ruckus for a few hours. And we actually got people to like think about the climate crisis in a way that maybe they hadn't before. And I did things like throw paint on the Silverfin building, on like the Shell offices. And that was a crazy one as well. And it's like, there are so many different ways that people can get involved in this more radical form of climate activism. Like, it's not just the crazy public stuff that gets you in trouble. There's this whole network of support that goes into making sure that those actions are possible, because they take time, they take resources, they take people, and it's such a wonderful network of people supporting each other and fighting for what they believe in. And people seem to think that this kind of climate activism is crazy. It's going way too far, you know, it's crossing a line. But the fact of the matter is that people are dying because of the climate crisis now, right? Like the floods in Pakistan, nearly 2,000 people died because of those floods, and millions were displaced. For us, stopping some oil from flowing or blocking a road, that's the crime against humanity here. It's simply absurd to me. So because for a while I was delivering talks about the social science behind what we do and asking people to join us in blocking roads and occupying oil terminals. And one of the things I like to ask people to think about when I was delivering those talks was, okay, getting arrested can really screw things up for a lot of people. You know, life plans, maybe there's a job you want that if you have an arrest record, maybe you can't do that job. Other things like that, maybe your family would be disappointed in you and things. But when I was thinking about what an arrest would mean for me, I thought, okay, what are these life plans that could be jeopardized? You know, I want to be a university lecturer one day, maybe that won't be possible. And I figured, okay, 20 years time, 30 years time, will that world where I'm a university lecturer still exist if nothing is done? You know, I'd rather live in a world where, okay, maybe I don't have the fanciest job, but I have a job, you know, we're not living in destitution. The state hasn't like completely clenched its fist around us as, you know, we're dealing with like so many people from the global south being displaced, you know. Think about how many refugees we have now and how the state treats them now, and how much worse it will be when that amount of refugees is so much bigger. You know, there's so much here at stake, and the media and all these different institutions won't be as honest with us as they ought to be about just how bad it is and just how quickly it can get far worse. So yeah, just think about that. Like, think about where you draw the line for what's acceptable for you, and ask yourself if you are meeting that line. Because not everyone can do the same things, not everyone can risk the same things. But think about what you could risk and ask yourself if you are meeting that. You know, we could always be doing just a little bit more. So yeah, thank you.